This session is sponsored by The Good Company, experts in the production and distribution of winery marketing materials, here to help deliver your message and sell more wine. And Wine Shipping, simplifying access to wine.
Welcome back. For our next session, we are pleased to announce Sandra Hess, the founder of DTC Wine Workshops. Sandra will be moderating a discussion over the next 45 minutes with 3 members of the DTC Consultant Network to uncover top 5 wine consumer engagement strategies. This is a really pivotal shift in our conference from last year in really engaging around a conversation in DTC strategies, particularly in this new environment. I'd like to welcome Taylor Eason, Principal of Cork and Fork Digital Media, Barbara Gorder, President of Undisclosed Location, and Matt Wood, Winery Membership Specialist and Communication Strategist for DTC Consultant Network. Sandra, take it away.
Thank you, Laura, and good morning, members of the wine industry. Excited to be here with you all during this very challenging time in our lives. And so thanks for taking time out to be a part of this important conversation. Before we get started today, just a little bit about who we are and what we're doing here. I've had the pleasure to support wineries across the US, Canada, and Australia, going on now 8 years with DTC Wine Workshops, and prior to that, Microsoft Dynamics CRM with the Winery CRM. So I love to balance the ideal blends of talent, tools, and technology when presenting best practices. And so today I will start off by saying there are no one-size-fits-all strategies, and I'm excited to be a part of this conversation with such a fine group of folks from the DTC Consultant Network. So Taylor, you can give us a little bit about you.
Absolutely. First of all, thanks, Sandra, for inviting me onto the panel. My name is Taylor Eason. I'm the principal of Cork and Fork Digital Media, an agency that helps food and wine brands in the digital space. I started off in the wine world as a wine critic and journalist. And about 10 years ago, I moved to California to help mid-sized wineries with their brand marketing and DTC. I worked at Gunlock Bunchu, J Vineyards and Winery. And then about 3 years ago, I started Cork and Fork Digital Media, where we specialize in search engine optimization, social media marketing, and pretty much all things Google. It's very fun to be in this industry right now, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Matt.
Thank you, Sandra, for the opportunity to be here. Yeah, my career goes back over 20 years in the wine industry to the various earliest days of DTC. And I've made it my mission to try and catch up with other industries and learn from them rather than focusing on just what the wine industry does. And I think that's contributed to a lot of success. And I'd like to share a lot of those tips and tricks with other wineries today.
All right, we'll wrap up with Barbara.
Hi, thanks again, Sandra, for having me. It's been great to work with you for such a long time. I come from the brand marketing side, originally working across DTC. I've been in the wine business for about 10 years now, working on DTC. I've worked for everything from retailer, Som Select, to Chateau Montelena and other brands, doing brand strategy, really good creative, differentiating creative, and that's my sweet spot and what I hope to bring to the conversation today. Excited to be with the whole team here.
Excellent. Well, we are going to go ahead and just dive right in here. For our audience, we are going to share with you the top 5 wine consumer engagement strategies 2020 and beyond. We will reserve the last 5 minutes today for Q&A. And this is going to be more of a view style roundtable conversation today as we reveal these top 5 strategies. And so, as I mentioned earlier, no one size fits all. And as we know, we're working in the most competitive time in the direct-to-consumer space, producer-to-consumer, across the U.S. with 10,445 wine brands competing for the attention of those wine buyers. And so I think one thing that I can share with you as far as a proven model across all segments, shapes and sizes, regions, is that those wine producers who have figured out who their tribe is and has encouraged that tribe to re-engage, to stay on the journey forward in very meaningful ways, has the magic formula figured out. And for some of you in today's audience, you might already be there, and others, you're maybe still on that path of getting there. And so we hope that you would leave today with some tools and proven methods to take forward with you. Pick and choose what you think is going to work best. If you have questions, reach out. We'd love to chat with you as a follow-up. Let's get right into also talking about pandemic. As far as our format today, we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about pandemic. However, going back to the tribe point, for those who know their tribe, we can see the loyalty that's been formed through pandemic stronger than ever. The intimacy that's happening with virtual offerings in the kitchens and living rooms of the super fans' homes. We see also now the connected consumer engaging in more high-touch, intimate ways. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a tee up, what we're going to talk about here today. Consumer engagement strategy number 1, develop a pre-visit game plan. And going back to the point about knowing your tribe, inviting like-minded audiences to engage and then re-engage, it all starts with having this piece dialed in. So let's move right into a conversation. Taylor, you are all things digital, Google, you're the Google guru. So why don't you start us off with how you're helping clients with the world of Google business?
Yeah, so 64% of all web traffic starts with a search engine, and 90% of that traffic starts on Google. Google pretty much is the 90-pound gorilla in the internet world. Gaining access to those kind of searches when people are trying to find you and to generate interest in your business can start with your Google listing, and it's called Google My Business. And it's what shows up. You'll see the example of kitchen sink. So those potential visitors that can come to you, especially 35 and under, are increasingly relying on Google My Business ratings to find new places to explore in wine country. One client that we have recently reported in a poll that, so one Saturday, they went out and asked every single customer who walked through their doors, and 72% of them replied that they found the winery on Google. So it's really important to have pretty photos, make people feel safe, have your staff wearing masks, and make sure that you have photos that depict how much fun they will have when they arrive. And that, I think, is why this particular client had that success, because it's just, everyone tries to go through and look at visuals and figure out where they're going. The ratings are part of it, but the images are really important. But the best thing about Google My Business is that it's free and it's really easy to do. So that's something that we've been doing for our clients, optimizing that.
Very important consumer engagement strategy in the digital spaces today. I mean, we are all about Google. And, Google tells us everything we need to do, where to go, where to buy our favorite, slippers, and where to eat. And so I think you've hit the nail on the head here. For these small producers in today's audience, 65% of wine producers in the US today are considered small, that 5,000 case and under. And I always get that question, what can we do that does not cost a lot to attract new audiences digitally? So thank you for touching on the importance of Google My Business. Now let's talk about the conversion to the winery website. And the top tool that I'm going to touch on today, pre-visit, is use of live chat. So both Lucky Orange and Live Chat are the most commonly used live chat providers across the wine industry within our client segment. And as you can see here, our friends over at Cake Bread have done a great job customizing this experience to, again, continue to convey a very high touch producer to consumer experience. Not only are we looking at our clients in the Napa Sonoma areas now, monitoring and measuring their success through use of live chat. We've got our clients down in the Central Coast. One quick case study, a ultra luxury brand in Paso Robles has been using live chat for going on almost 3 years. They now pay a full-time employee who manages their social media interactions, their rating review interactions, full-time, to also manage their chat experiences and watch the conversion from chat to things like completed reservations, wine sales, wine club signups. And a very important key takeaway here when we look at measures of success is the number of times you can take a live chat experience from the chat environment to an actual phone call, a personal email. So again, another data collection strategy for moving that looky-loo on the website to a transactional customer and then eventually a visitor and fan. So again, if you have questions about live chat, reach out. I cannot say enough about this, but have a strategic plan in place to have the right person in front of the chat, forward the chat during non-operational hours, customize the experience, and monitor within your first 3 months the results. And it pays for itself typically within the first 2 to 3 months. Moving on into another important discussion point, I talked about the world of virtual, the intimacy that wine producers are having today. I was able to conduct this case study with a group of my clients, small, mid, and large size brands from across California a few months back, and end of June actually. And so we talked about some key takeaways here, and I'm not going to bore you to death with all the case study numbers. But for a small producer, Newsom Harlow Wines in Calaveras wine country in California, this small family producer, Scott, talks about the fact that he was able to generate over $55,000 in revenue through his virtual bundles and winemaker experiences from mid-March all the way through the end of June. And then he had additional revenue achievement of, a total of $75,000 in additional sales that came through the virtual experiences he was offering on his Friday night happy hours, etc. A very big ROI point and measure of success for all three of these brands is that they were able to expand brand reach to an audience of national friends, family members of their connected consumers, their members who are already on board, inviting friends to come out and have a great virtual experience. So getting those wine bundles delivered, joining together in this virtual space has proven to be very successful. He will continue to offer virtual bundles and experiences for the long run. Our friend Andrea over at Round Pond, they maximize use of their assets, taking culinary to their virtual events, providing beautiful bundles of wines and their olive oils, recipe share, all that good stuff, ended up netting $101,000 in revenue from their virtual bundles through mid-March, end of June. And then an additional $23,000 in sales came through upselling post-virtual experience. So the re-engagement opportunities with these new fans in the virtual spaces. 9 new club signups came directly through the virtual experience as well. Lastly, my friend Brendan over at Wente Vineyards in the Livermore Valley reported that they launched Alexa as an opportunity to support this very recognized large producer across the US and globally to expand their brand reach, which resulted not in a significant amount of revenue off the right out of the gate, but it did give them $63,000 in revenue as a result of the virtual experiences overall. Corporate tastings, they also bundled in under the virtual offerings, which brought in about $2,500. $15,000 of that came through the Alexa efforts. It's still a little bit hard to track though all the revenue through Alexa. And then his ROI point on that is they had a total of $63,000. It paid for itself as far as the Alexa investment within their first month. And I couldn't help but mention, during this time of pandemic, while so many are exploring the opportunities of virtual offerings, Jordan out in Sonoma County, the Alexander Valley, they have done such a wonderful job speaking the right language, being very mindful of what visitors want. And with so many international trips canceled over summer, they launched the Paris on the Terrace wine and food experiences. And so just remarkable for me to see how mindful this luxury wine producer has been. I know that Taylor, you do some work with Jordan also. Would you like to expand on this?
Sure, absolutely. So when COVID hit, John Jordan didn't want to lay anyone off. So they started looking at their strengths and their assets. To your point that you said, Sandra, earlier, look at your assets. So they have an amazing property and they have a really great chef. So what they did was they just sat down and went, what can we do? They added an additional experience so it's kind of a sit down lunch, and they called it Paris on the Terrace, to maximize on these strengths. This is in addition to a couple of other experiences they have that are more COVID friendly, like a hike and some picnics. The cost is $110 per person, and they're pretty much sold out for the next couple of months. So it's been a massive success for them. But I think the silver lining is that it kept all of the hospitality staff employed, and they even hired laid off local restaurant staff in Healdsburg to come on board to help. So that was a really nice silver lining to the whole experience.
Thank you, Taylor. So Taylor, let's talk about your work in the Sonoma County area. I know you support quite a few clients there. And when it comes to all things pre-visit engagement strategies, let us know, what you're seeing as far as proven models.
All righty. So I work with a lot of Sonoma County wineries. This is a case study from a mid-sized Sonoma County winery. The challenge was to drive winery visit reservations during the slow time during COVID. So trying to capture the folks who were thinking about wine tasting, starting to consider visiting wine country. And the time frame for the case study is about 5 weeks during midsummer. And we used Facebook, Instagram, and Instagram stories ads to drive the conversions. We served social feed ads to the client's fan base, website visitors, as well as something called the lookalike audience, which are new people that Facebook goes out and finds who are similar to these, the fans and the website visitors, as well as their mailing lists. The results were pretty impressive. During 5 weeks, they generated 174 reservations, but also they got email signups, they got one clump sign up, and a few e-commerce conversions. And depending on the size of the winery, another winery could have these kind of results. You budget anywhere between $4 and $18 per conversion. Of course, it does depend on the brand and your strength and that kind of thing. But we were really, really happy about that particular case study. So I want to share another case study that I have, a little bit of a smaller Sonoma County winery. The challenge, of course, was to drive visit reservations. It's about a 7-week period during midsummer. Same digital platforms. The ad creatives, because this was a little bit more of a funner winery, they were clever videos and images that showed staff wearing masks and plenty of visuals to show how much fun people were having when they were arriving at the winery. The results were 56 reservations, 16 email signups, and 6 e-commerce conversions. Even though e-commerce wasn't what we were trying for, it still happened. So that was a nice little perk.
And over what period of time was that, Taylor?
7 weeks.
About 7 weeks. And great results. Thank you. So Barbara, Taylor, you two, your digital marketing strategies. And I get this question a lot, I'm sure. I just want to put it out there for the audience right now. How do wine producers today see payoff with digital marketing strategies, social media ads, etc.? What is the secret to success here?
I think I can actually say that one of the keys to success is doing lifestyle shots versus bottle shots. I think that's something that's been really important. I've seen anywhere from 30 to 50% higher engagement in terms of improvement on results. There's, of course, a famous Harvard Business Review ROI on product versus lifestyle, which is 2 to 1. So in favor of lifestyle. If people believe that you're different and you're authentic, you're going to win the day versus the generic things that one sees all too often, and unfortunately, when people do either paid or organic social.
Thank you.
And I would echo this sentiment of create your brand personality, figure out who you are, what you are, and figure out ways to show people that in a visual format. It's, I do think that a lot of wineries are very same old. And the ones that I've seen that are super successful in the digital space, especially, are the ones that are able to capture their personality in a visual format.
Thank you. Great words of wisdom. Goes back to that point about knowing your tribe. Facebook's helping wine producers get to know their tribe with these lookalike audiences that you talk about. But it starts with some form of consumer data collection, demographical information, all that good stuff. Let's get into number 2. Consumer engagement strategy number 2, offer high-touch visitor experiences. Now, this is a proven strategy that I cannot say enough about. We know there are a lot of great wines on the shelves of Costco's and Safeways these days. And the true producer-to-consumer relationship forms when high-touch experiences are extended pre-visit, at-visit, and post-visit. So today, let's talk about some of these proven strategies. As I tee up today's conversation with Matt, Matt has an extensive background leading wine producers into the direct-to-consumer space, building long-term repeatable strategies. And he and I have sat down and talked about, the foundation of where that comes from is making sure the staff has the tools they need to be successful. And that is by providing things like hospitality service standards, hospitality training, making sure there's a greeter at that front door on your busiest days with a welcome pour, ideally, obviously not during COVID, but we're talking, holistically, post-COVID and beyond. These are things that groups like Charles Krug, Cake Bread Sellers, J. Lore have done to up their game. And I think when you look at the size producers that I'm referencing right now, they are widely distributed. They already have an audience of fans across the US that recognizes these wines through restaurant retail. So when it comes to that high-touch visitor experience at the wine center, it's about that relationship that needs to form. So I just kind of wanted to tee up our conversation today about the importance of having high touch as a part of the strategy. So Matt, your time over at Mondavi, I'm sure you've got awesome stories to share on this topic.
Thank you, Sandra. Yeah, the iconic building there, the Mondavi Arch, built in 1966, back really before DTC was a thing. So they hadn't really thought about those visitor spaces and experiences. So when the winery was remodeled in 2000, they had a wide portfolio price points. And so they wanted to really differentiate those experiences and drive the consumers to the places where they would, one, feel most comfortable getting the experience they were looking for, but also where they had the greatest opportunity to spend their money on the products that they were looking for. So the Tokalon room is the perfect example of that. Staffed with a more mature, seasoned professional staff who had this as their career, to be the people there. They would take it as their responsibility to build a relationship with the consumer, so that even after the consumer had left and maybe didn't ever have the chance to return to California to the Robert Mondavi winery, they would still be in touch with them. They would call them, they would email them. And so by creating a very welcoming, friendly relationship, they took that long beyond the initial visit. And in fact, the Tokalon room in the late 2000s was actually generating $2,500 of revenue per square foot, which is not quite as good as Apple, but it's better than almost every other retailer out there. And it was really because of those long-term connections and that feeling of being part of the Mondavi family.
And can you remind us of what period of time this was?
They started that program around 2000 when the winery was remodeled. My experience with it goes from 2004 through 2008. But the success just kept building on itself because you added more and more people into that relationship. It was actually called the Tokalon Circle, and these people felt really special. They felt really engaged with the property.
You touch on some very important takeaways here, Matt, and thank you so much for sharing that story. You look at how thoughtful you and your team were at that point about matching the right people to the right scenario. And so you talk about these more mature, sophisticated wine educators coming in and building these long-term relationships, being that personal, and maybe even private client manager in some cases, as we call these titles today. So this is really ahead of its time. So thank you so much for sharing those words of wisdom. Also, your time over at Domaine Chandon, I love that you talk about this experiential economy. Share with us some stories there.
Yeah, Domaine Chandon, obviously a very different brand from Robert Mondavi and a lot of other brands that I've worked on. There we would get well over 200,000 visitors a year. And right at the beginning of 2011, when I was there through 2015, we realized that we were probably, when other wineries were at 20% millennial visitors, we were already at 40% millennial visitors. And it was really because the experience at Chandon was very different, as it is at some of the other sparkling wine producers, very different than your standard tasting room. And so we looked to figure out a way to leverage that. And it doesn't take you long to realize that millennials travel in packs. It's not 2 or 4 people, it's more likely to be 10 or 12 people. And so we created ways for them to come and engage as a group and have a great group experience. And what we were focused on was our brand. So, brand books, brand architecture, hospitality standards, training for all the staff. And really, the staff were all fully engaged on what the brand meant, what the pillars of the brand were, what brand language was. And so we were delivering, a sales value, a direct-to-consumer sales value, but also that high-touch brand experience that was going to turn these people into people who would buy Chandon when they're in the broad market.
Brilliant. And the idea of, knowing the intention, knowing the purpose of the wine center at that time for a widely distributed brand was not so much high net sales achievement. It was really about forming these long-term high touch relationships that then resulted to sales and for the long run. So thank you for that wonderful story. Now, I bring up this next slide for Barbara, as you and I have sat down and talked about this whole Somm Select business model. And I'm really excited to hear from you today about how this wine retailer is changing the game with how a brand engages consumers. So can't wait to hear some of your case study points.
So our challenge was to go out to consumers. We had an opportunity with USA Today as a media partner. And what we wanted to do was introduce a club that was a very different kind of a wine club. We had perceived that there was a difference in the two different kinds of psychographic targets that were coming to us. It was either people who were wine curious. They tended to be a little younger. They tended to want to understand more. They, wanted to be able to know more about Bordeaux, or they wanted to know more baseline things. They weren't really clear on what island whites were or different kinds of wines. And so they wanted some education with that versus like the wine-centric people who were perhaps people who would vacation in Tuscany and knew that they were going to go to wines. So we had an opportunity to basically create some content, partner with this media group, and go out and launch our club. We did this in September to late November of 2019. We also used it as an opportunity to leverage local and regional PR. And we ended up leveraging that to the point where we got national attention from national media vehicles like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and some other, and actually television as well. So the club got noticed and was highly rated. We had a great time going out and meeting consumers and then following those consumers later. Kelly Clarkson was a particular highlight with Kevin Hart, national media like the Wall Street Journal. And the club was highest rated in the country, according to New York Magazine, in terms of a subscription series. So it kind of built on itself. And from a long-term result standpoint, we've built the club from absolutely nothing to it's their highest grossing club right now. And I think education is something that is furthering consumer education is such a hot button right now in terms of being able, people have time right now in COVID. And I think it's really translated well for the club, as well as obviously the PR paid off for us in a big way.
Mm-hmm. So not the traditional wine producer to consumer relationship, but what I think the lessons that we can take from this in any environment when we think about a top consumer engagement strategy is that Somm Select is a very focused strategy. These are sommeliers, with consumers trusting the opinions of sommeliers to provide a variety of wine and food experiences and make recommendations ultimately about the types of wines that are going to be enjoyed. And so, going back to the point about knowing your tribe, building repeatable models and invitations and that appeal to that tribe, I think Somm Select has done a wonderful job here. And of course, they've got the budget to bring in some celebrities, work with national media. So for those large producers in today's audience, if you have questions about how Barbara has helped with this project, definitely reach out. Thank you, Barbara. All right, engagement strategy number 3. Develop a post-visit game plan to re-engage. I cannot say enough. I think this might be one of the most important processes in growing long-term repeatable success in direct-to-consumer sales and marketing. One, it's not about the first sale that's the most important in direct-to-consumer. It's the second engagement and beyond that becomes the most important measure. not only with spend, but time being the number one commodity today for wine consumers across the nation. How are they choosing to reinvest with your wine brand? And so we're going to talk about proven strategies that we hope you find helpful. This is my ugly slide. I'm just going to warn you all now. But the point being here is if you haven't thought through your conversion workflow holistically, I encourage you during this downturn with visitation to take some time to get together with your DTC teams, sales and marketing come together and really think through the type of tools that you're providing everybody in every channel to work in a holistic fashion. And so, of course, 90% in many cases of the sales begin in the tasting room, club conversion, wine sales, etc. And so when we think about what's happening there, it needs to be dialed in more than ever with payouts on conversion, not just to club today, but conversion to that mailing list. And so when we think about those out-of-state guests coming in, ideally, what is your strategy for getting them to experience wines through your online store, through a winery e-com environment within 60 days of returning home? And so it used to be the name of the game, let's pay everybody on conversion to club, let's get all of our out-of-states in club, 20, 30% conversion goals, et cetera. And today we know times are changing. And so what I want to start off this conversation with today is the type of tools that we need to give staff, number one, to think about the re-engagement. And so it's that relationship that needs to be formed so that every person that comes through that front door feels that they have been invited back before they ever leave. And so I'm not going to bore you to death with every strategy here, but I am going to say this. If you're still leaning on, would you like to join our newsletter list, our mailing list as your main form of data collection at the tasting room today, you will fail. Today's wine consumer is much more sophisticated than we've ever seen. They want a meaningful invitation to re-engage, and they do not want another email in their inbox about your vineyards or about your latest release. What they do want is something that's going to be about them. And so change up that invitation of mailing list to, let's make sure that you're in our system as you're ringing up that wine order. Because when our guests come back, we always like to do something extra special, a little upgrade to one of our reserve tastings, for example. So I encourage you all, when you think about your holistic approach to direct-to-consumer wine sales, knowing that anywhere from 80-90% starts in the tasting room traditionally, it's a good time to look at what your offer is that's meaningful to become a part of your mailing list. And make sure that when you do obtain that name and email with every qualified order, there's a personal reach that happens in what I call the Tuesday morning workflow. Personally emailing from the tasting room manager or maybe the hospitality manager and saying, thanks so much for visiting. We'd love to invite you back in and upgrade you your next visit. It's a very different proactive strategy that maybe many of you have thought through. And if you have questions about that, let us know. Moving on from the ugly slide, and let's get into the panelists. And so some other proven methods that you're seeing with that re-engagement model. Barbara.
So this goes back to a little bit what I was starting to talk about at the beginning. The slide on the visual on the left with the bottle and the 2 glasses and the fruit. Please don't use this in your social advertising. Please find a way to tell me who you are. I mean, think about your particular business and tell me more about that. And it doesn't necessarily need to have any kind of product shot. It's going to tell me about the experience you're going to have. It's going to tell me about the location that you're in. It's going to tell me about how it fits into your home environment. I think one cannot be said in terms of like what people are churning out of their own home kitchens right now is really important. I mean, people are cooking, they're looking at visuals, they're spending a lot of time on screens. So think about the consumer and who they are, less about the product.
Absolutely, Barbara. And I have to give a shout out to our friends, JCB, John Charles Boisset, and his collection. When you think about their ability to invite their tribe on an ongoing journey through lifestyle marketing, lifestyle events, I think it's just an absolutely phenomenal example for those in the audience looking for some inspiration. Anything to add, Taylor, Matt?
Well, I worked with Gunlock Bunchu for many, many years, and they're really, really good at lifestyle marketing. Their music program, which started in earnest, 5 years ago when I was their director of marketing. So music is an authentic passion for the owner, Jeff Bunchu. And he wanted to mash up, not jazz, but like contemporary, interesting alternative music and host concerts at the winery There are 3 different locations where you can see acts play, and if anyone's ever heard of the Wichita Music Festival, that's something that came out of Jeff Bunchu. But that definitely helped gain a younger audience and added a cool hip factor, so precious to generate interest to this particular audience. But that said, so at Gunbun, it's very true to their mission and their personality and not an afterthought. And it's also been just a hugely concerted effort to drive further into that, further music into their lifestyle marketing.
Thank you. Absolutely, Matt. I think you touched on this earlier in your case studies also about Mondavi and others, but, appealing to that group today, a group of visitors, the group audience. I love when brands who have the space and the ability to cater to groups do so through imagery. They're promoting the feeling, the emotion that these groups now traveling in packs want to have right out of the gate. And so I think that you're absolutely spot on about imagery helping sell the story. Post-engagement strategies also include things like, social measures as well. So let's talk about some of those, Taylor.
Okay, so I just have one big case study to share. Sonoma County Winery, mid to large. The challenge was to generate new e-commerce sales. COVID timeframe, although e-commerce is all the time, but the timeframe is May 1st through August 25th or so. Digital platform is social media. And from this just small little time frame, 579 e-commerce purchases were created, and it was all lifestyle. And it was people enjoying the wine, people toasting, kind of what you saw in that slide just now. And it works because it has an emotional attachment to the brand. And these e-commerce purchases weren't just from fans or current fans. We use lookalike audiences to find new audiences. And in addition to this 579 e-commerce purchases, we had 146 email signups, 124 visit reservations. The budget for any general winery, the budget you can have is between $5 and $20 per purchase. And like I said before, it all depends on where your winery's at and what kind of brand strength you have in the market. But it's a very, very affordable place to try and generate e-commerce sales.
And so Barbara, and thank you for that, Taylor, because I think, small, mid, even some large brand, this has to be an absolute part of the strategic plan. And Barbara, when you talk about supporting some of your large multi-brands, what are some words of wisdom you'd have here?
We haven't really touched on influencers much, and influencers sometimes get a bad rap because they can be complex relationships, but I have used them very effectively and used them in trade. And what I encourage you to do is try to think outside of the wine box, if you will. Try and think about other things that your wine consumers are engaged in. I did a really great program just for trade for juvenile products, but I focused on people who had dogs, which had enormous audiences that were just organic audience, and putting the product in their hands and letting individuals be creative. Long story short, just for trade, it was for a key Mother's Day timeframe, and I did 166% year over year because that was a key driver timeframe for the client. So try and think outside of wine, outside of normal food or even travel, but think about what other passions your consumers are going to be engaged with, because wine people are interesting. People who like wine, as Taylor was talking about music, that's fabulous. And also I wanted to just touch on the diversity topic. Definitely looking at diverse audiences at places where people are not being marketed to actively is a wonderful strategy.
I like your style. It's very out of the box, but what you're saying is when it comes to this influencer segment, go through the trade side, work that angle where it makes sense. And so I think that's just a brilliant strategy. And so let's move back over to Taylor and talk about this e-commerce space. And we think about all things post-visit and continuing to engage with today's consumer, especially during shelter in place, during COVID, more people stayed home than ever, unfortunately. Now you add the smoke to the situation due to fires. But I think that these are lessons that we can learn for the long run on how wine brands have effectively leveraged the e-commerce space as a re-engagement tool. And so, Taylor, what are some ways also that producers can up their game when it comes to e-commerce?
Well, one place I think a lot of wineries leave money on the table is retargeting. So remarketing, retargeting, same thing. Essentially, you're trying to recapture cart abandonments using certain tactics. Anytime an ad, so you're driving back to the cart, you serve up social media or even web display ads. And the costs vary based on the goals and the audiences, but we're talking $200 a month towards ad spend. And I mean, the average ROI during COVID for retargeting ads for our clients is about $80 in sales per dollar spent on ads. That's a huge ROI. And then pre-COVID, it was $20 in sales. So that's an interesting disparate. It just tells you how many people are starting to move to the e-commerce space. And I don't think they're going to go back. People like the convenience of having wine delivered to their door. So, I mean, I think small, medium, and mid-size, and huge brands need to think about that. And we are starting to get some inquiries from larger brands trying to figure out how to move from the trade space into the DTC space. And this is very interesting. I'm happy to walk through this with anyone because every sale counts right now, essentially.
Absolutely. And you've taken the mystery out of retargeting and how important it is to recapture this cart abandonment. So thank you for that story as well. So we're going to talk about also a strategy that Taylor has introduced. And this is an example that I brought from my friends over at Talbos Creek, visited them this past month down on the Central Coast. I am not a huge fan of this, but Taylor's actually convinced me otherwise. So take it away, Taylor.
I think you have to couch it as, all right, I'll start it. So a Wi-Fi system, you arrive at the winery and in exchange for free Wi-Fi, you ask for their email. It has to be an opt-in email, and generally what we see is Gmails and things like that. But we do analyze results and we analyze them separately from the rest of the email list just to make sure that this email capturing target or tool is actually working. So we use systems like ZenReach and Beambox. Those are two systems that we've played around with. So the system automatically sends a welcome email immediately, kind of like this one, and then another 1 week later or so to remind them what a good time they had, maybe offer up an e-commerce deal, ask for social media followers, and maybe even reviews. You could think about a survey link to see what kind of experience they had. It all depends on what your goals are. But during COVID, these particular Wi-Fi systems, it all depends on the traffic in your tasting room, but they've been averaging 50 to 60 new emails. And these are in fairly healthy tasting rooms in terms of traffic. But pre-COVID, it was between 200 and 210 per month. So it all depends on what you want. I mean, they're not inexpensive. But they're also, you have to think about the ROI of how much you get back from these particular emails.
Sure. I think the principle here is one, ask permission. So you're offering a service with your free Wi-Fi at your visitor center. And then the point becomes ask for permission to continue down the path together as an opt-in consumer, right? And then you touched on a very important piece. Continue then to provide invitations, offers that are meaningful. And so, Matt, any words of wisdom along this line as well?
Taylor hit it great. There's such an opportunity to survey people on their experience. Because if somebody's had a bad experience, we used to survey people immediately, and then we used to have the manager call them and apologize. And if you actually do that, you can turn that person from a bad experience into an evangelist for your brand, because that reach out to put something right is worth so much more than just a good experience in the first place to people, because they don't get it from many other places. So I'd recommend that highly. And then the other one is ask people how they want to be contacted in the future. because if you get them, that you now you've got their Gmail, but they might prefer to get text from you, so you can get their mobile number just by asking them for it. So you expand your opportunities to connect.
Mapping out those communication strategies. And so I've always been impressed with Matt's background in the industry, rolling out everything from loyalty apps to streamlining communication strategies with SMS, text, and IM. So thank you for bringing up that very important point, Matt. All right, let's get on to consumer engagement strategy number 4, leverage your proven retention strategies. And we all know it's the name of the game, especially in the membership segment. If you don't have a retention strategy, making sure that attrition rate is below 10%. So you want a retention rate of about 90% and attrition 10% or below, then you're missing out here, because these are your loyalists. And so you've got to keep that funnel always full with new club signups. But how are our highly successful clients keeping those attrition numbers low? And so if we can maybe chat, Matt, with you about your time at Franciscan.
Yeah, this really goes back to the dark ages. This is before the turn of the century, so it's a long, long time ago. But one of the things we recognized was, there's 3 factors in the size of your club. There's the number of people who walk through the door, your audience, there's your acquisition rate, and there's your retention rate. And the easiest number for you to impact is that retention rate. So what we did, we analyzed our data, and this is really sort of manual and spreadsheets and everything else. There was nobody doing this for you like there is now, and said, where do we lose people? And what we found was we had a problem getting people from the Saturday afternoon, woohoo, I've drunk a few too many glasses of wine and I'm going to sign up for every club that I visit, to actually getting them to their first shipment. And so, we said, well, we actually need to send them something to say, hey, you're part of the family. Welcome. This is what you can expect from us. And just doing that alone reduced that immediate attrition, which had a big impact. And then we realized we had a little problem around 3 months, and we needed to remind people why it was so cool, maybe give them an offer. And we tested all kinds of different things. And I think that's always the answer here, is look what works for your brand within the context of what you're trying to achieve. And then we had another issue around 8 months. By addressing each of those areas, we took our average length of membership from 22 months to 26 months, which is, pretty close to a 20% improvement, which on a club with that was growing fast, that was heading in the direction of 4,000 members, that has a huge impact on your bottom line.
And I'm hearing a couple of things. One, you stayed very close to your data, but you also thought through how to continue the high-touch relationship that happened at the visitor center in between visits now as a new club member. So those are just wonderful words of wisdom. Anything to add, Taylor, Barbara?
I mean, I dig into the data with club retention and attrition. That's really the gold standard of trying to figure out, do you throw a gift in to their third club shipment? I mean, you have to know the data, and you have to, like you said, know your tribe and start really digging into getting to know them. And then maybe even find certain audience segments within your club membership. Are there people that like to sail? Should you be doing sailing excursions or something along, of course, post-COVID? But those are just like dogs. Barbara said, should you have a dog meetup at the winery? That kind of thing. I think there's little pockets of happiness you can give to any club just by knowing the data.
And also our clients, when I start to, map out the success factors with our clients who have very long, very high retention rates, average length of membership, 10 plus years in some cases for these iconic brands, there's something that always comes back to me. And I think about, the Mondavis of the world, the Krugs of the world, and it's being very intentional with how you continue to invite your loyalists on this journey forward. There's this togetherness about the journey forward, but it's also getting to know that tribe, getting to know the audience, and then putting together experiences that are fresh, that keep them excited about what that future journey means. And that often means leveraging access over discounts. We know that if you become a member of a club, you're going to get some kind of a discount, typically outside of allocation and ultra premium. And so what are those unique access points that wine brands today are extending and keeping fresh, year after year. Also, don't be afraid to pick up the phone, right? I think, Matt, you and I talked about this. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to add to that, Sandra, that don't forget about the people who used to be your club members. They love you. They just don't want to be married to you anymore. There's a big opportunity there.
The re-engagement strategy, simply by being mindful. And I get that question a lot. Well, how far should we go back though? Should we call somebody who hasn't been a member for 3 years and say we miss you? So again, attaching the genuine invitation and re-engagement strategy to the situation. But don't be afraid also to pick up the phone sometimes. I think if it's been a year and a member has canceled, psychologically, sometimes there's an embarrassment factor of, gosh, we were so embarrassed now to go back now that we're no longer members. And so that proactive approach that you talk about, picking up the phone, inviting them to an upcoming event or the new virtual experiences can mean everything. Also, I lied. I have one more ugly slide. And this is my customer touchpoint calendar example. And so we talked a lot about using data analytics, plotting, planning, being mindful. It means sometimes sitting down and being very proactive with how both sales and marketing are going to work together to do the right things, to provide that personal outreach. And sometimes is it as simple as within 2 weeks of signing for club shipments, to simply pick up the phone, call your out of area members, ask how they're enjoying their latest releases, walk through any questions, and always invite back to the next thing. And of course, 50% of the time you get voicemails, have it dialed in, have it be high touch and all about that member. All right, we are on the last consumer engagement strategy today, and that is to keep the funnel full. Build those referral business strategies. I mean, if you at best are seeing 1,000 people a month coming through your doors, let's say a small to mid-sized brand, and you are at 20% of those visitors coming through referral relationships, you are golden. That is really a formula that I will preach to all of my clients outside of parts of Napa where it's very restricted in terms of private visits only, my 100% allocation only clients. But for everybody else, if you've got 15 to 20% minimum of your traffic coming in through effective referral strategies, you're golden. Because it goes back to the point of knowing who your tribe is, and then those like-minded individuals who are going to be very interested in the types of experiences that you have to offer. And so when you partner with like-minded hospitality groups, whether it be neighboring tasting room managers and staff, restaurant tours, hotels, adventure companies, you're going to see a consistent flow of the right visitors. And so today, let's talk about some grassroots tactics, but maybe some out-of-the-box tactics here with the panel as well.
So just as a baseline, from a branding standpoint, when you go out to your referral partners, and this can be done super simply with like a 3 to 5 page PDF, or you can get into a brand book that's over 100 pages. So you can get to the beach in a Rolls Royce or a Volkswagen, it doesn't matter. But how do you want your logo to look? And is it in black and white? Is it in color? What's your voice? What do you have in common with this potential partner? How are you going to exploit that partnership together so that it's 1 + 1 = 3? But really having so that look, feel, voice, so that everybody knows, as Sandra, you were saying, so everybody's part of the tribe and that we're all together on the same page. But building that material internally so that you can go out and make different approaches to different partners. This is just more of, in terms of partnerships, color palettes part of the mix, however size is part of the mix. So that's more material that you can have in your brand book, making that as complete as, quite frankly, your budget can afford. Like I said, basic to more elaborate, depending on the size of your business.
For those of you small in today's audience, does a brand book really make sense for you? You're going to have to ask the question, but at the very least, go back to Taylor's earlier point about Google My Business, making sure you've got fresh content, hours, offerings. If you're going to roll out virtual tasting experiences, make sure all of your referral partners know about it, right? And so the same time that sales and marketing updates offerings and such, you've got to make sure that you're getting that message out to all those people bringing in visitors to your front door. Grassroots, I can't say enough about The brands that are seeing anywhere from, $8,000 to $10,000, 8 to 10,000 visitors per month. This works, and so is it for everybody? Maybe not so much, but for an iconic brand, for more established brands with high levels of visitors in a highly trafficked tourist region, these referral passes work when you've got a couple coming in from Dallas, visiting a Sonoma tasting room. They're staying at a luxury hotel, they're qualified, and you know what? They're asking for a specific, VIP experience. This is the card to have that you put into the hand of that type of couple, right? And so you've got to pick and choose. A couple key things I want to say about this. Don't make it, available to the masses. So maybe with your referral partners at those luxury hotels, you issue maybe 20 per quarter or what have you. You sign them. They have an expiration date, so they feel that that there's some kind of associated value with these passes as well. Taylor, Barbara. When we think about also out-of-the-box referral strategies, I look at a Facebook page for Decanter Magazine, and just their Facebook followers alone were 111,000, not to mention what's happening with their print. They're very specific to varietal topics, to regional topics. They're speaking the language of wine collectors and enthusiasts today. So how would you leverage some of these opportunities as well?
I can think of one example in the paid ad space. So one tactic you can use on Facebook is to grab the fans of Decanter Magazine and serve up your ad to those fans. So that is a possible referral tactic. I haven't tried it, but I've definitely used audiences based on Wine Enthusiast, Decanter, Departures Magazine, you name it. I've thrown them into an audience and then served it. I haven't necessarily tested the Decanter audience, but it could be interesting to use that as a referral tactic.
I like where you're going with that. Barbara.
And what I would do to build on that would be to say that having media partners can be some of the best work. So Thrillist is really great at this. The other thing I was going to mention is podcasts. Podcast advertising can be super affordable. There's going to be $1 billion spent in podcast media in 2020. So it's a burgeoning space to all different kinds of verticals of people, often who have time on their hands, and you can really, sub-segment your audience. People are doing it, and so it's really valid. And then building partnerships as a whole, like Millennial Magazine is wonderful. The woman who's the editor there loves to put together, like we just had this sort of conversation where she sort of put together an entire package. So there are media people that work like that. So those are just some different strategies.
Wonderful. And again, not one size fits all, but I wanted to make sure the audience also thinks about how to leverage these type of digital relationships also to reach new like-minded audiences. And so with that said, we have revealed our top 5 consumer engagement strategies 2020 and beyond.